I never imagined a simple help wanted ad could unravel my entire reality. Yet here I sit, confined to my dimly lit room at 3 a.m., terrified to even blink, every creak and groan of the settling house sending shivers down my spine. It all began with that damned advertisement in the local newspaper. Night shift attendant needed at Twilight gas station. Competitive pay, flexible hours, must be able to follow instructions precisely. Apply in person. I was desperate, plain and simple. My parents, bless their well-meaning but ultimately clueless hearts, had been hounding me for weeks about the necessity of pre-college work experience. Their refrains echoed in my ears. It'll teach you responsibility, and you need to learn the value of hard work. A night shift, I reasoned, would be the perfect compromise. Work while the world slept, leaving my days free for friends and the fleeting joys of summer before the looming specter of college. Besides, how taxing could running a gas station at night truly be? My mind conjured images of quiet solitude, punctuated only by the occasional weary traveler seeking fuel or a late-night snack. Perhaps I could even steal moments to study or lose myself in a good book during the lulls. It seemed, in essence, the ideal cash grab for an 18-year-old eager to savor his last taste of freedom. The Twilight gas station sat on the very edge of our small town, where the familiar comfort of suburbia yielded to the oppressive darkness of the surrounding forest. I'd driven past it countless times, yet never felt compelled to stop. It always struck me as somewhat dilapidated, a relic of a bygone era compared to the gleaming, corporate-owned stations closer to the town center. When I arrived to apply, the manager, a man named maybe Mr., initially appeared ordinary enough. He was middle-aged, his hair streaked with gray, his face perpetually etched with a frown. But his eyes, there was something deeply unsettling about them. Too alert, too intense, as if he were constantly bracing for some unseen threat. He barely spared a glance at my application before offering me the job on the spot. A red flag, perhaps, but at the time, I was simply relieved to have secured employment so easily. "You start tonight," he stated, his voice a brusque, no-nonsense rasp. He handed me a set of keys and a folded piece of paper. "Follow these rules exactly and you'll do fine." I unfolded the paper, anticipating mundane instructions like, "Don't give out free snacks," or "Always count the register." Instead, I found this chilling list. "Do not leave the store between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. for any reason. If you hear knocking on the windows after midnight, ignore it. Do not look outside. The phone will ring at 2:15 a.m. Answer it, but do not speak. Listen for exactly 30 seconds, then hang up. If a customer comes in wearing all red, do not look them in the eye. Ring up their items as normal, but do not accept cash from them. The bathroom door must remain locked at all times. If you hear sounds coming from inside, do not investigate. At 3:33 a.m., turn off all the lights for exactly 60 seconds. Do not move during this time. If you see a black dog in the parking lot, close all the blinds immediately and recite the Lord's Prayer 3 times. The coffee machine will turn on by itself at 4 a.m. Let it run until it stops on its own. Do not drink the coffee it makes. If a customer asks for something from the back room, politely refuse and suggest they try another gas station. At 5:55 a.m., place a single penny on the counter. It will be gone by 6 a.m. If it isn't, call the emergency number immediately. A nervous laugh escaped me. Surely this was some elaborate prank, a hazing ritual for the new kid. But maybe Mr.'s face remained utterly devoid of humor, not even a flicker of amusement in his intense gaze. "Kid, I need you to understand something," he said, his voice dropping to a low, gravelly register. "These rules aren't suggestions. They're for your safety, and the safety of everyone in this town. Break them at your own risk." I nodded, my initial amusement rapidly dissolving into a growing sense of unease. There was a silent plea in his eyes, a desperate urging to take this seriously. As he turned to leave, he paused at the door, casting one final, lingering look back at me. "Oh, and one more thing," he added, his voice barely a whisper. "Whatever you do, don't fall asleep." With that ominous pronouncement, he vanished, leaving me alone beneath the flickering fluorescent lights of the twilight gas station. The hours leading up to my shift were a torturous exercise in self-deception. I desperately clung to the belief that this was all an elaborate charade. Perhaps maybe Mr. was simply testing my mettle, gauging my ability to handle pressure. But no matter how hard I tried to rationalize it, I couldn't shake the gnawing dread that had taken root in the pit of my stomach. As I drove to the gas station that night, the world seemed irrevocably altered. The familiar streets of my small town felt alien and menacing in the oppressive darkness. Shadows danced in my peripheral vision, and more than once, I could have sworn I saw something darting across the road just beyond the reach of my headlights. I arrived at the Twilight gas station a few minutes before 10 p.m. The night was unnaturally still, no crickets chirping, no distant hum of traffic, just an eerie, suffocating silence that seemed to press in from all sides. Maybe Mr. was waiting for me, his face a mask of grim resignation. He gave me a hurried overview of the basics: how to operate the register, the location of supplies, emergency protocols. But his eyes darted nervously to his watch, as if he were desperate to escape. "Remember the rules," he said, his voice tight with barely suppressed anxiety as he headed toward the door. "No matter what happens, no matter what you see or hear, follow the rules." And then I was alone. That first night was quiet, almost disappointingly so. On Earth, I'd braced myself for the weird to descend, but it was just a regular shift. A few stragglers materialized for late-night snacks and gas. Nothing to raise the hairs on your neck. Still, as I followed the rules maybe Mr. Thompson had laid out, thinking better safe than dissected later. At 2:15 a.m., the phone shrieked, jolting my heart against my ribs. I snatched it up, listening for what felt like an eternity, 30 seconds of pure, unadulterated static. Hanging up, I felt a fool for the surge of adrenaline. 3:33 a.m. came and went with the stealth of a shadow. Then I killed the lights, stood rigid in the oppressive darkness for a full minute, and flipped them back on. Nothing. At 4 a.m., the coffee machine, true to form, shuddered to life on its own. A little jolt of the uncanny, but it merely brewed a pot, the aroma a siren's song, and then powered down. I was sorely tempted to indulge. The smell was intoxicating, but remembered the ironclad rule and resisted. When 5:55 a.m. finally clawed its way around, as I placed the penny on the grimy counter as instructed. At 6 a.m. it was gone, vanished. I hadn't witnessed a soul, hadn't heard the telltale chime of the door. It had simply ceased to be. As I stumbled out that morning, a cocktail of relief and anticlimactic disappointment churned within me. Relief that nothing truly horrific had transpired, but a nagging sense of letdown that it had all felt so mundane. Maybe it was just an elaborate prank, a test of endurance. The second night, however, was a different beast altogether. That's when things began to unravel. Around 1:30 a.m., as I was wrestling with the chip aisle, replenishing the dwindling stock, when I heard it. A tentative, almost shy knocking on the front window. I froze, rule number 2 echoing in my skull. The knocking returned, a shade louder this time. My heart hammered a frantic rhythm against my sternum as I fought the urge to look. "It's just the wind," but I muttered, a pathetic mantra. Or some drunk looking for trouble. But the sound persisted, growing bolder, more insistent. It took everything I had not to whirl around and confront whatever was generating it. The sound migrated from window to window, circling the entire building like a predator stalking its prey. Sometimes it was a delicate tapping, other times a furious pounding that threatened to shatter the glass. After what felt like an age, but was likely only a handful of minutes, it ceased. The ensuing silence was almost more unsettling than the cacophony had been. I exhaled a shaky breath, realizing I had been holding it captive. As I attempted to regain my composure, the phone erupted, nearly sending me through the roof. A glance at the clock confirmed my dread. 2:15 a.m., precise to the second. With trembling fingers, I seized the receiver and listened. Initially, there was only static, a familiar, grating hiss. Then, a new element, whispers so faint they bordered on inaudible. As the seconds bled by, the whispers intensified, becoming more frantic, more desperate. Just before I slammed the receiver down, I could have sworn I heard my name carried on the static. I spent the remainder of that shift a jumpy mess, flinching at every creak and groan of the old building. When 6 a.m. finally arrived, I practically bolted for the door, leaving the gas station behind me. I entertained the notion of quitting truly. I did, but the pay was alluring, and a morbid curiosity gnawed at me, whispering promises of what terrors might await. Plus, I didn't want maybe Mr. Thompson to think, but I couldn't hack it. So, I returned for a third night and a fourth and a fifth. The subsequent nights were comparatively tranquil. I adhered to the rules with religious fervor, extinguishing the lights at 3:33 a.m., ignoring the phantom knocking, dutifully placing the penny on the counter at 5:55 a.m. But other, subtler anomalies began to surface. Sometimes, late at night, when the gas station was deserted, if I would catch fleeting glimpses of movement in my peripheral vision. Turning to investigate, there would be nothing, only shadows playing tricks. Other times, as I'd be stocking shelves, I'd pivot to discover items rearranged, displaced, moved to entirely different locations. The bathroom was the epicenter of dread. Despite keeping it locked, as the rules dictated, I frequently detected noises emanating from within. Sometimes it was the sound of rushing water or flushing toilets. Other times it sounded like stifled screams or something large and violent thrashing within the confined space. It was roughly a week into this descent when I had my first encounter with a customer swathed in red. The night was dragging, and as I was on the verge of dozing off behind the counter when the bell above the door announced an arrival, I looked up, and a wave of icy dread washed over me. The woman who entered was draped head to toe in crimson. Red shoes, a red dress that seemed to absorb the light, even a red hat perched jauntily on her head. As she approached the counter, the warning flashed in my mind, and I hastily averted my gaze. "Good evening," she purred, her voice possessing an unsettlingly melodic quality. "I'd like to purchase these, please." She placed a handful of items on the counter. A pack of gum, a disposable lighter, and a glossy magazine. With my eyes glued to the register, I rang up the items. "That'll be $7.50, I croaked, my voice betraying my unease. "Oh dear," she responded, a hint of amusement in her tone. "I only have cash. Is that a problem?" I swallowed hard, my throat suddenly constricted. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but we can't accept cash at the moment. Our system is temporarily down. Perhaps you could try another gas station down the road." A heavy silence descended. I could feel her gaze boring into me, but I stubbornly refused to meet her eyes. "Very well," she said finally, her voice laced with something I couldn't quite decipher. "I suppose I'll have to return another time." As she turned to leave, I committed a fatal error. I glanced up, just for a fraction of a second. Our eyes locked. Hers were bottomless pits of black, devoid of any light, any humanity. A paralyzing chill snaked down my spine, stealing my breath. The bell chimed again as she exited, and I slumped against the counter, gasping for air like a drowning man. It took several agonizing minutes to regain my composure. The rest of that shift was a blur of heightened anxiety and paranoia. Every mundane sound sent me reeling, and I was convinced the red woman would materialize again. When 6 a.m. eventually crawled around, I was utterly spent, stretched taut on the edge of sanity. As I was analyzing, chill snaked down my spine, stealing my breath. The bell chimed again as she exited, and I slumped against the counter, gasping for air like a drowning man. It took several agonizing minutes to regain my composure. The rest of that shift was a blur of heightened anxiety and paranoia. Every mundane sound sent me reeling, and I was convinced the red woman would materialize again. When 6 a.m. eventually crawled around, I was utterly spent, stretched taut on the edge of sanity. As I was leaving, Mr. Thompson arrived to take over. He cast a glance my way, a frown etching itself onto his face. "You saw something, didn't you?" he inquired, his voice low. As I nodded, words caught in my throat, refusing to be spoken. He sighed, the sound heavy with resignation. "Look, kid," Mr. Thompson said. "I know it's tough, but you're doing good. Just keep following the rules and you'll be fine." But I was desperate for answers, a storm of questions brewing within me. What was truly happening here? Why were there so many bizarre rules dictating my every move? Who was the woman draped in red? Yet, something in Mr. Thompson's demeanor suggested that he wouldn't, or perhaps couldn't, provide any explanations. As the weeks drifted by, I fell into a warped sense of routine. The strange occurrences began to feel almost commonplace, twisted as it was. I grew accustomed to the nightly phone call, the enigmatic coffee machine, even the sporadic noises emanating from the locked bathroom. And then, there was the night that shattered everything. It began innocently enough. I was roughly halfway through my shift when a man entered, seeking to purchase cigarettes. He appeared affable, engaging in small talk about the weather and lamenting the ever-rising gas prices. While I rang up his purchase, his gaze drifted toward the back of the store. "Hey, you wouldn't happen to have any of those special energy drinks, would you?" he asked casually. "You know, the ones from the back room." My body froze, rule number 9 flashing through my mind like a warning siren. "I'm sorry, sir," as I said carefully. "We don't have a back room here. Maybe try the gas station down the road." The man's friendly facade crumbled in an instant. His eyes narrowed into slits, and his voice dropped to a menacing growl. "Don't lie to me, boy. I know you have them. Give me what I want, or things are going to get real unpleasant for you." My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat of fear. I fought to keep my voice steady as I repeated, "I'm sorry, but we don't have what you're looking for. I'm going to have to ask you to leave." For a fleeting moment, I thought he was going to physically attack me. But then, to my immense relief, he spun around and stormed out of the store. As soon as he was gone, as I released a shaky breath and slumped against the counter, my legs threatening to give way. Then I heard it, a low, guttural rumbling emanating from outside. As I looked up, as I felt my blood turn to ice, there, in the parking lot, stood an enormous black dog, its eyes glowing with an unholy red light in the darkness. Its gaze locked directly on me. Panic washed over me as I remembered rule number 7. As I scrambled to close all the blinds, my hands trembled so violently that I could barely manage it. As I drew the last blind, as I heard scratching at the door, a sound that sent shivers down my spine, with my heart pounding in my ears, as I began reciting the Lord's Prayer, "Our Father, who art in heaven." The scratching grew louder, more frantic, escalating into a desperate assault on the door. As I could hear the dog snarling and barking, the sound muffled by the glass but still terrifyingly clear. "Hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done." A loud thud echoed through the store, like something heavy throwing itself against the door with brute force. As I flinched but kept going, clinging to the words like a lifeline. "On earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread." The noises outside reached a fever pitch, a crescendo of chaos. It sounded like the dog was trying to tear the entire building apart, driven by some primal rage. "And forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us." Suddenly, everything went quiet, as if a switch had been flipped. The silence was almost as terrifying as the cacophony that had preceded it. As I finished the prayer 2 more times, my voice barely audible above a whisper, when I finally mustered the courage to peek out the window, the parking lot was deserted. There was no sign of the dog or anything else out of the ordinary, only the cold, empty expanse of asphalt. As I spent the rest of that shift huddled behind the counter, jumping at every creak and groan of the building. When 3:33 a.m. rolled around, as I was almost grateful for the minute of darkness. At least then I couldn't see anything that might be lurking in the shadows, waiting to pounce. As dawn approached, as I began to relax, a sliver of hope piercing through the darkness. as I'd made it through another night, another descent into madness. As I was placing the penny on the counter at 5:55 a.m., when as I heard the bell over the door chime, signaling someone's arrival. As I looked up, expecting to see Mr. Thompson arriving early to relieve me of my duties. Instead, as I saw the man from earlier, the one who had inquired about the back room, and he wasn't alone. Accompanying him was the woman in red and several other individuals, all with those same black, vacant eyes that seemed to swallow the light. They filed into the store silently, surrounding the counter, their presence suffocating. "We're closed," as I stammered, my voice barely a whisper. Even though it wasn't quite 6 a.m. yet, the man smiled, but it was a cruel, predatory expression that sent a chill down my spine. "Oh, I think you'll want to stay open for us," he said, his voice dripping with menace. "We've come for what's in the back room, and this time we're not taking no for an answer." As I glanced at the clock, the numbers mocking me, 5:59 a.m. Just one more minute, and my shift would be over. Maybe Mr. Thompson would arrive and know what to do. Maybe he would be able to stop this nightmare from unfolding. "There is no back room," as I insisted, desperately trying to keep my voice from betraying my fear. "Please, you need to leave." The woman in red stepped forward, her movements fluid and graceful despite the palpable tension in the air. "We know there is," she said, her voice still musical but now laced with an undercurrent of chilling menace. "And we know you have the key. Give it to us and we'll let you live." As I shook my head, backing away until I hit the wall behind the counter, trapped and cornered. "As I don't have any key. As I don't know what you're talking about." The group began to advance, their eyes gleaming in the fluorescent light, hungry and predatory, as I could feel the panic rising in my chest, threatening to overwhelm me, to consume me entirely. My eyes darted around, searching for any means of escape, any glimmer of hope, but as I was trapped, surrounded by an encroaching darkness. Suddenly, as I remembered something, the rules, they had kept me safe so far, providing a fragile shield against the unknown horrors. Maybe, just maybe, they could save me now. With trembling hands, as I reached for the light switch, my fingers fumbling with the plastic. The group paused, momentarily confused by my action, their advance faltering. As I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what was to come, and flipped the switch, darkness engulfed the store, plunging us all into an abyss of shadows. As I held my breath, counting, the seconds ticked off in my skull, each one a hammer blow. 1, 2, 3. I could hear them shuffling through the oppressive black, their footsteps, somehow too loud, echoing unnaturally on the linoleum floor. A cold, clammy something brushed against my arm, and I bit down hard, a desperate attempt to swallow the scream that clawed at my throat. 58, 59, 60. In a surge of desperate hope, as I slapped the light switch back up, blinking rapidly as the sudden, harsh glare sliced through the darkness. To my utter disbelief, the gas station was empty, vanished. No trace of the menacing figures, no sign that anyone or anything had ever been there at all. Just as the insidious tendrils of doubt began to wrap around my sanity, whispering that I'd imagined the whole grotesque tableau, the bell above the door chimed, its sound brittle and sharp in the silence. Maybe Mr. walked in, his face an unreadable mask, as grim as ever I'd seen it. "You did good, kid," he rasped, his voice like gravel grinding on bone, yet laced with a sliver of something that might have been admiration. Not many make it this far. A million questions clawed for release, but all as I could manage was a weak, trembling, What were they?" He shook his head slowly, a weary gesture. "Trust me, kid, you're better off not knowing. Go home, get some rest." He hesitated, the silence stretching, thick and heavy. Maybe start looking for a different line of work. This life, it's not for everyone." As I nodded dumbly, feeling the blood drain from my face, and began to gather my meager belongings. As I was halfway to the door, maybe Mr. called out, his voice suddenly urgent, "Oh, and kid, whatever you do, don't even think about taking any job offers from them. no matter what they promise you. A shiver, colder than any I'd ever known, ripped through me, and as I hurried out into the weak, watery morning light. For the next few days, I desperately tried to cling to the notion that it had all been a stress-induced hallucination, a waking nightmare born of exhaustion and fear. Maybe as I had simply fallen asleep on the job and conjured the whole thing in my fevered mind. But deep down, in the cold, hollow core of my being, as I knew it had been real, I couldn't bring myself to go back to the gas station. The thought of facing whatever malevolent entity lurked there filled me with a paralyzing dread. But that didn't mean it was over. The strangeness followed me home. Unsettling things started happening, subtle at first, then escalating with terrifying speed. As I'd wake up in the dead of night to find all the lights in my room blazing, the harsh illumination doing little to dispel the encroaching darkness. Sometimes, as I'd hear whispers, faint and indistinct, emanating from inside my closet. But when I wrenched the door open, heart hammering against my ribs, there was nothing there but my clothes, hanging limp and lifeless. One night, about a week after as I quit the job, as I woke to find a single, tarnished penny lying on my nightstand, the blood in my veins turned to ice as the last rule flashed through my mind. At 5:55 a.m., place a single penny on the counter. It will be gone by 6 a.m. If it isn't, call the emergency number immediately. As I glanced at my alarm clock, the digital numbers glowing with an ominous red light. 5:54 a.m. With hands that shook so violently as I could barely grip it, as I picked up the penny and placed it carefully on my desk, then sat rigid on the edge of my bed, watching and waiting. 5:55 a.m. came and went. The penny remained, glinting dully in the dim light. At 5:59, a sliver of hope flickered within me. Maybe it was just a coincidence. Maybe as I had simply left the penny there myself and forgotten about it. Then, just as the clock ticked over to 6 a.m., as I heard it, a soft, almost imperceptible knock at my bedroom window. As I froze, every muscle in my body locking tight, the second rule from the gas station slamming into my consciousness. If you hear knocking on the windows after midnight, ignore it. Do not look outside. The knocking came again, louder this time, more insistent, laced with an unnatural impatience. As I squeezed my eyes shut, trying to block out the sound, to sever the connection to whatever was outside. That's when, as I heard the voice, it was maybe Mister's, but twisted, corrupted, wrong. It sounded distorted, amplified, as if it were coming from the bottom of a deep, dark well. "Kid," the voice croaked, "we need to talk. There's been a change in management at the gas station. We've got an opening for assistant manager. The pay is good, and the benefits, well, let's just say they're out of this world." As I could feel myself being drawn, inexorably, toward the window. Part of me, the part that still clung to a shred of sanity, wanted to look, to see if it really was maybe Mr. out there. But a deeper, more primal part of me knew with chilling certainty that whatever was outside my window, it wasn't human anymore. "All you have to do is say yes," the voice continued, its tone oily and persuasive. "Say yes, and all this can be over. No more fear, no more uncertainty. Just say yes." As I clenched my fists, fighting against the overwhelming urge to obey, to surrender. "No," as I whispered, the word barely audible, a fragile defiance against the encroaching darkness. "No, I don't want the job." There was a long, pregnant pause, the silence thick with unspoken menace. Then the voice spoke again, all pretense of friendliness gone, replaced by a cold, hard edge of pure malice. "You can't run from this forever, kid. Sooner or later, you'll come back. They always do." As I heard something scratching at the window, a sickening sound like claws scraping on glass, then silence. When, as I finally worked up the courage to open my eyes and look, the first rays of dawn were painting the sky a bruised purple. The penny was gone from my desk, and there were no visible marks on my window. But as I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that it wasn't over. Whatever had been unleashed that night at the gas station, whatever dark forces were at work in our town, they weren't done with me yet. As I sit here now, writing this all down in a desperate attempt to make sense of the madness, in the faint hope that someone will believe me, that if as I disappear, someone will know what happened. To whoever reads this, be careful of job offers that seem too good to be true. Be wary of places that operate only at night, and if you ever find yourself working at a gas station with a strange set of rules, follow them, no matter how absurd they may seem. Because the things that lurk in the darkness, they're real, and they're always watching, always waiting for someone to slip up. As for me, as I don't know how much longer as I can keep running. Every night as I hear the knocking, every day as I find a new penny, in my pockets, in my food, under my pillow when as I wake up. Last night, as I dreamed as I was back at the gas station. Everything was the same, yet twisted, distorted, profoundly wrong. The fluorescent lights flickered with a sickly green glow, casting long, skeletal shadows, and the shelves were stocked with products as I'd never seen before. Their labels written in bizarre, alien languages that hurt my eyes to look at. Maybe Mr. was there, standing behind the counter, his figure wreathed in shadow, but when he turned to face me, his eyes were black voids, bottomless pits of nothingness, just like the others. "Welcome back," he said, his voice echoing unnaturally in the cavernous space. "Your shift is about to begin." I jolted awake, drenched in a film of cold sweat, my heart hammering against my ribs. For the briefest of moments, a phantom scent clung to the air. The unmistakable reek of the gas station, a noxious cocktail of gasoline fumes, day-old coffee, and something else, something indefinable that always lurked just beyond the reach of my senses. I don't know how much longer as I can hold on. A desperate part of me screams to flee, to throw a bag in the car and drive until the asphalt gives way to dirt. But a colder, more rational part knows it's a futile gesture. This, whatever this is, would hunt me down no matter the distance. Sometimes, in moments of utter despair, the temptation to accept their offer gnaws at me. Would it truly be so terrible to surrender, to simply say yes? At least then, the agonizing fear and gnawing uncertainty would finally cease. But then as I remember the vacant, bottomless emptiness in their eyes, and a wave of revulsion washes over me. Whatever they promise, the price is far too steep. So, as I will continue to fight, to resist, for as long as humanly possible. To whomever stumbles upon this, as I don't know if as I'll still be among the living when you read these words. If as I'm gone, if as I've vanished like so many others before me, as I suspect, please, for the love of God, don't go looking for me. Don't attempt to unravel this mystery. Instead, share this story with the world. Expose the horrifying truth of what's transpiring in our seemingly idyllic town. And if you ever find yourself driving late at night and spot a gas station on the edge of town, its lights beckoning like a false promise in the inky blackness, press down on the accelerator and drive on. No matter how weary you are, no matter how desperately you crave fuel or a steaming cup of coffee, keep driving. Because the night shift is always hiring, and once you clock in, you can never truly escape. This is my final entry, as I can now hear a distinct knocking on my bedroom door, even though as I am utterly alone in this house, as I don't know what horrors await me on the other side, but as I know as I can't barricade myself in here forever. Whatever fate has in store for me, always remember, the rules exist for a reason. Abide by them no matter the cost, and above all else, don't ever fall asleep on the job.